Hey guys, Patrick here. I'm back at the news desk. It's been a little bit since I've been on here, since I've been on the YouTube with any kind of market info. End of the school year, beginning of summer, all kinds of that stuff, the usual excuses, but it's been a bit of a hectic time. So I'm excited to be back. It's early July, which means we just passed the first half of the year. So it is time for the first half of the 2021 market report. Aside from figuring out all this equipment, microphones and processors and ring lights and all this other stuff, the hardest part of these videos is to take an entire market and then pull apart the pieces and sort of give some context or perspective on this enormous market. We're almost $8 billion in sales this year. How do you make sense of it in a video where people don't, click out and move on right away? So I'm going to try to make sense of the entire Niagara market. Now, I'm not going to look at every city on all the pieces of it because we'd be here all day. I'm going to focus more on the region and then St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, which are first and second in the total number of homes sold on any given year. So they're a really good sample size. Sometimes if you look at Niagara-on-the-Lake or Fonthill only, they can have a few sales that can pull the data in either direction. So as a result, you get this sort of roller coaster. I always look at it like a kid at a restaurant, with the paper on the table with the crayon, and they just do this. Sometimes that's what the month-to-month data looks like for some of the smaller market cities. So we're going to look at supply and demand. So the supply of new listings and then the demand or the number of sales and how each month performed in the context of the last 10 years. So going back to 2011, how did the months so far this year perform? Not just against last year, because last year was so artificially out of whack. There's no point in comparing, April this year to April last year, and I'll show you why in this video. Okay, so I'm going to try to get through it as reasonably quickly as possible. Hang in there, and hopefully this will put the market into context for you and help explain where we're at, where we've been, and possibly where we're going or where we expect to see things go. Okay, let's get started. So I think one of the fastest ways to learn about what's going on in the market is to look simply at the supply against the demand. There's 5 people selling this widget over here, but there's only 2 people that want to buy it. Therefore, you're in a buyer's market where the buyers have more choice. Prices tend to come down or relax, right? Flip that over, and you've got 5 buyers that want to buy those 2 widgets. All of a sudden, you've got a seller's market where the sellers are calling the shots. There's more people than widgets, and therefore pricing tends to go up. And that's largely what we've been living through and experiencing so far this year, and a great deal of last year as well. Some of those COVID months aside, overall, that's what we've been seeing. So I'm going to show you a few graphs here. You're going to see a pink line. That represents what was average for that specific month. So, and these are going to be comparing each month this year, so January 2021, March, etc., against what was average or what was normal for that month going back to 2011. And that, I think, will give you a better context or better perspective of what's going on. So with no further ado, January 2021, number of new listings. So again, that pink line is average, and you can see January 2021 was below the line, 15% lower than what was normal for the month of January. So that's an undersupplied market, right? You put that against January 2021 for the number of sales, the demand right here, and you can see they were 40% higher than what was normal. So you've got negative 15% on the supply side, and you've got 40% higher than what was normal for the month of January for the number of sales. Make sense? I hope. January, moving to February, new listing inventory improved. It was up by 14% over what was normal. Meanwhile, sales, took another step up, and it was up at 51%. You can see that right here for the number of sales. So again, even though new listing inventory improved, the number of sales sort of did the Charlie Brown with the football thing and went up even further. March and April, 2 huge months. They were record-setting. They're now the heavyweight champions of the data world, if you will. So let's look at those. So March, new listing inventory up 50%, 50. We were all excited. Yay, new listing inventory. It's a buyer's, not a buyer's market, but it's the first sign that buyers have a better position in the marketplace. So everybody was excited. Meanwhile, the number of sales right here were up by 79%. So yes, new listing inventory went from here to here, but sales went from here to here. So it just couldn't keep pace. April. Number of new listings actually settled back down, up 20% over what was normal for April. And then for the number of sales, 73% higher. So that's a big spread, right? The supply, the number of widgets in the market, aka homes, 20% higher than what was normal. Meanwhile, the number of buyers or the number of sales, 73% higher. That's a wide discrepancy. That's only going to cause a seller's market, buyer frustration, price, escalating prices, bidding wars, all that other stuff that you guys all saw and experienced. So what happened in May? Basically, you can't run at a full sprint forever, right? Eventually, you got to slow the engine down before parts break. And so that's simply what happened is the market just started to calm back down to what was more normal. So May, new listing inventory up 6% over what was normal. So that's a big, went from 50 in March to 20 in April to 6% in May. Meanwhile, the number of sales, again, still outpaced at 42% higher than what was normal for the month of May. That's really strong. Right, that's even though we started to feel it, that's still a really strong market. Month of June, which we just passed last week, the number of new listings 10% higher than what's normal, so still by all accounts decent, right? But the number of sales up still 22% higher. Now, when you compare that to the previous 5 months, that's the weakest month so far this year, June, being only 22% higher. By all accounts, that's a tremendous month, right? You beat the average by 22%. That's great. But you're competing against 42 and 73 and 79 and everything else. It feels like the market has done something. It has. It's just basically come back down to earth. It's returned to what would be more normal numbers or closer to what's more normal. It's still a strong market, but it's not running flat out full speed, stitch in the side kind of pace that it was back in March and April. So again, April and March of this year, first and second place all time for the number of homes sold for any month in history. So it's only natural that May and June are going to calm a little bit. And again, that's the nature of June, right? End of school year, whatever that school year was. Cottages, COVID is relaxing. People are more focused on seeing family they haven't seen or going to a patio or all this other stuff that, the life stuff that we've all missed out on. And so that's all factored in as well to contribute to what has been a calming factor on the market here as we went through June. This graph shows you listings January through June of this year and how each month of 2021, how high above the average it's been for new listing inventory. As mentioned, January was actually 14% under. And then you can see that climb that happened through March and April, and then settling back down in May and June. Same deal here for the number of sales. Again, 40%, 51, 79. And then it settled back down in June to be 22% higher than normal. When you put those two together, you can see no matter what new listing inventory did, sales just outpaced it and couldn't keep up. So you saw that gap the whole way through, right? That's unique to this market. Normally, it's not like that. If at all, the gap is tighter, or in some markets, it flips the other way where new listing inventory is actually outpacing sales when you're in a buyer's market, right? So right now, it's just been so heavily favored in the seller side. That's why you've seen that gap. Lastly, on this part, this graph here shows you why you should put zero consideration or weight or thought into comparing April of this year to April of last year, March of this year to March of last year, et cetera, because you have two types of market that, knock on wood, are not going to be compared to again or aren't going to happen again. For example, March and April of this year, 50, 60, 70% higher than normal in a lot of segments of the market. That same month last year, March, April of 2020, were 50, 30, 40, 50, 60% lower than the average. So you can see that huge discrepancy, right, in March and April in particular, but still in June, you can see it's pinched back, it's got closer to where we can start talking about July of this year compared to July of last year, August, etc. But that first 6 months of this year are really dangerous to look at 1 month against 1 month. It's hard enough to look at the first 6 months against the first 6 months, but it's all we got, right? So yeah, that graph I think speaks to why you should throw out the window any talk of 1 month to 1 month until now. And now we can get back to that good stuff. Okay, so that's that part. So as mentioned, I'm not going to compare every city in Niagara to that past 10 year. We'll be here all day. I'm just going to look at St. Catharines and Niagara Falls because, again, they're first and second in the total number of homes sold. So they tend to lead the way as far as overall market environment for Niagara. So St. Catharines, you can see, has really struggled for new listing inventory all year. In fact, I think there was 3 months underneath the average and 3 above, which is kind of unique to the city. So it's had a bit of a tough go. The new listing inventory never really got cranking, and so that shows you that when you look at sales, Again, strong, particularly strong in March and April, but you can see the market has settled back down to earth pretty quickly as we got through May and June. And so one really unique thing to St. Catharines I'm going to show you here is that new listing inventory for the month of June actually outpaced the number of sales. So you can see the black line has actually come above the pink line. That's unique to St. Catharines. Check that. It might have happened in other cities, smaller volume cities, but I don't think it did. But for the largest market in Niagara to do that is pretty interesting when you look at the grand scheme of what's going on out there. So again, that's where new listings pushed back. If you get another 30, 60, 90 days of that, all of a sudden you're into a totally different market. All of a sudden buyers have more choice, they have more time, they have less pressure. And sellers will have more to think about as far as pricing and strategy, right? As far as that goes. So Niagara Falls, kind of an interesting story. Niagara Falls new listing inventory. You can see the last 3 months, 3%, 2%, and -2% against the average. So a really strong February and March. April, May, and June, an instant, you can see it went right down. Precipitous, I believe, is the term for April, May, June. So that's a quick change as far as that goes. And then you can see for the number of sales, I believe I'm right on this. Yeah. So number of sales were still strong, positive territory, but you put that against the new listing inventory being down, that's going to help support pricing and what's been going on. Had that new listing inventory tapered a little bit more like other markets, you would have a different environment in Niagara Falls. But as long as that new listing inventory continues to underperform and the sales volume stays where it is, you'll see pricing will stay largely where it is or escalate still because, again, buyers still don't have enough choice. So that's Niagara Falls and St. Catharines. So I think we've all learned about supply and demand over the last year and a half. Whenever there's not enough of something or there's a lot of demand for something, the pricing for that thing goes up, right? Lumber, trailer hitches, anything, that impacts pricing. And that's exactly what's happened to the Niagara real estate market across the board for the most part. So I'm going to look at pricing going back to January 2020, pre-pandemic. So you'll see that the first few months of last year were really strong. It was kicking off to be a huge year. COVID sort of put that on ice, and then the market said, okay, cool, we'll come back later. And that's exactly what it did. So let's look at this. Niagara region, since January 2020, average sale price across the entire region. You can see the first time the market ever topped $500,000 for 1 month was February of last year. Fast forward November of last year, so whatever that math is, 9 months later, the first time the market ever topped $600 for an average sale price. Fast forward, remember the epic month I was talking about, the record-setting month of April, the first time the market ever topped $700,000 for an average sale price. So we went from 500 to 700 in 14 months. We haven't seen anything like that in the past. I think we can all agree on that. St. Catharines, average sale price had never topped $500,000 until August of last summer, August 2020. February 2021, the first time our market ever topped $600,000. And June, the average sale price was $669,000 for that month. Year to date, we're in the 630s range, is where we're at so far. Niagara-on-the-Lake, it's tough to put too much into month by month there because you can have a huge sale that pulls the data or a bunch of larger sales. But in general, this gives you an indication of where things are at. You'll see back in March and April how the average sale price came right back. That was because the higher end of the market across the board sort of stopped in its tracks. It just froze, and then it came back, and then it came back, and then some as we got in through the year. But you can see since December of 2020, the average sale price in Niagara-on-the-Lake has topped $1 million. The average sale price for the year is on pace to be over $1 million, which it has never done before. Lincoln, Beamsville, Vineland, Jordan, that whole area. January 2020 of last year, the third time only it had ever topped 600,000. And then June of last year, the first time it topped 700. And then March of this year, the first time the market there on average topped 800,000. So it went from 6 to 8 in, again, 14 months. Grimsby, a perennial big producer, always a popular place, proximity to Toronto, all that sort of stuff. So in general, has always been a higher than normal for Niagara average sale price. July of last summer, so 11 months ago, the first time the market ever cracked 700,000. March of this year, the first time it had ever cracked 800. And here we were just in June, the first time the market in Grimsby, on average, topped $900,000. So you're probably starting to see a trend in that. You're exactly right. This has happened across all of Niagara. Niagara Falls, the average sale price had never topped $500,000 until last summer. January this year it topped $600,000. The average sale price for June just passed was $674,000. Again, only marginally above St. Catharines, which it's been typically doing for the last little while. Thorold, March last year, first time the market topped $500,000. January of this year, the first time the market in Thorold topped $600,000 on average. June was $631,000 on average for the whole Thorold market. Funny side note on that. Some people would say, new construction is pushing that way up. Yes, it is to a point. You'd be surprised if you took new construction data out of the Thorold market data. It doesn't change a whole lot. Sidebar. Anyway, Welland, the only city in Niagara that's been averaging under $600,000 for a month, but that's slowly changing. November of last year, the first time that the market ever topped $500,000, and May of this year, the first time it's topped $600,000. It's been over $600,000 on average for the last 2 months, and that's carrying on here in July as well. So we'll see June average was $609,000 for Welland. Fonthill, perennially second place behind Niagara-on-the-Lake for the highest average sale price in Niagara, and that carries on today. January of last year was the second time that Fonthill had ever topped $800,000 for a single month for an average sale price. November of 2020, first time it had ever topped $900,000. And just a couple of months ago, May 2021, the first time the average sale price for all residential in Fonthill topped $1 million was 2 months ago this year. Almost done. Fort Erie and Port Colborne can be different because some of the large lakefront estate properties can really pull the numbers, particularly Port Colborne. Not a huge volume market as far as the number of homes sold, but that being said, their numbers are still strong. July last year, first time Fort Erie topped $500,000, and March of this year, the first time Fort Erie topped $600,000 for their entire market for a monthly average sale price. Port Colborne, July of last year, the first time their market topped $500,000, and November of last year, the first time it topped $600,000. June, and again speaking to large cottages, June the average sale price was $698,000 for the entire Port Colborne real estate market. So that gives you an indicator, right? Of we were talking about sales being up 79% and new listings being up 20%. That spread that carried on through so many months. That's what it leads to. It leads to escalating prices. It leads to more buyers around a smaller table, which has caused what we've seen with these pricing, where these new price thresholds that cities have hit that they hadn't hit ever before, and then all of a sudden they break through another one 7 months later. That's pretty unique to this market, and but it's I thought it's sort of noteworthy. Okay, let's move on. We're almost done. Pricing, affordability, how are buyers going to get into this market? All those things have been talked about and discussed. There's great concern around that, people's ability to access home ownership. Not just Niagara. If you look at average sale prices in all kinds of markets, it's been pretty incredible what's been going on. And I think a picture says 1,000 words. So I have two pictures for you. This first one shows you the sale price segments for St. Catharines back in 2017. So it shows you, 300 to 400, 500, 600, 800 to 900, whatever it is, how many of the sales that year went to a specific price bracket. And you can see on that graph, 68% of all homes sold in 2017 were $400,000 or less. And so, that's a significant chunk of overall activity and overall sales, right? So a lot of buyers finding their way into the market back then. And then show you 5 years later here in 2021, on pace for that same bracket, 400,000 and under being about 9% of the entire market. So it went from 68% to 9% in the span of 5 years. And a lot of that movement really happened in the last 2 years, the last 18 months, because 2018 and 19 were somewhat flat as far as that went. But that's a it shows you very quickly how much of the market or how much of the pie went from this price segment, skipped a few steps, and went over this price segment. So yeah, that's in St. Catharines. Is that consistent across the region? Pretty much so. If I were to pull that same data, I think you'd see that same sort of distribution going on. Where do we go from here is one of the big questions we get. What's going to happen in the market as we go through, right? all we can tell you based on what we just saw on all this data as well is what happened was we had a market that started out strong January, February of 2020. It got stopped in its tracks by COVID, and that created this sort of pent-up bubbling pot thing that happened and released through July, August, September. And then as we got to the end of last year, it absolutely ramped up into January, February, March, and April. We're just nonstop, full speed ahead, chugging away market. And now things have settled down a bit for all kinds of reasons, right? The end of or relaxing of COVID, the end of the school year, summertime, seeing family they haven't seen, doing life things that they haven't been able to do. And it's sort of diluted the attention of people, rightfully so, right? And so the big factors we've seen in the market is 2, 3, 4 months ago, it was very predictable. What do you do next? How are what you can reasonably expect to happen was much more predictable. Is because we saw it happening, that happened there, that happened there, that happened there. Therefore, that same thing is likely to happen here. And you can hang your hat on it to some extent and then move forward with that, right? Versus now, in the market we're in now, strategies are going to change all over the place. You have to have a clear idea of what direction you want to head to, but what if that doesn't happen? Then what do we do? The what if conversations, right? Expectations, we've used that word a ton. Because, there's lots of variables, external variables that are going to impact the next 60, 90 days as well, just as much as the last 60 days has been, right? So where do we go from here? There's a bunch of factors we're watching. Supply and demand. Remember the St.Catharines thing where it flipped? Does that continue on? Do new listings continue to build and the buyer demand wane a little bit, starts to ebb, right? And does that happen for 30, 60, 90 days in a row? Because that is going to directly impact the process. It's going to impact pricing. It's going to impact buyers and sellers and how they interact and expect and the psychology behind the market. So that supply and demand is one big one. COVID. Does it continue to ease? Do we feel more and more free? Are we going to an Ice Dogs game? Is there a concert? Are we eating in restaurants? As vaccination rates continue and good news keeps coming in as that opens up, there's two routes you can take on that. Now people are not going to want to move. They want to have, they want to travel, enjoy life, do all the things they haven't been able to do in the last couple of years, and then move, down the road. We'll see, right? But that COVID impact is a real X factor. It's a real wild card on what's going to happen as far as that goes. Interest rates. Interest rates are going to go up. It's just a matter of when. But the psychology of that, I look at it as like if you're on a long, intercontinental flight, those flights where it's so smooth, you almost forget you're on an airplane. You're sitting there watching a movie and eating some food and relaxing. You're thinking about having a nap, and then you hit air turbulence and then the plane's shaking. That sort of jars you and say, oh crap, I forgot about that. So interest rates, at some point interest rates are going to go up. Is that going to create a turbulence in the market and cause some, psychology change or a flip in confidence out there? So that'll be a factor as well. And then the GTA out of market buyers, immigration is going to restart at some point. Is that whole let's get out to the country, let's get out to Niagara thing? Has that reached its peak? Is it back to normal? Is there still legs left in that runner? It's whatever analogy. We will see, right? But it's going to be interesting to see if there's still steam in that side of things as well, because obviously that's feeding the demand side, but it's not feeding the supply side, which creates imbalance as well. So those are the four big factors we're watching. Again, it's supply and demand, COVID, interest rates, and GTA and out-of-market buyers or the demand side. So that's it in a nutshell. Where we go from here, we expect to see a reasonably calm, sort of typical Niagara summer. My buddy Sean DeLotte was talking about that the other day as well. We expect to see prices sort of bounce around where they are with no big movement in either direction. But the market has all kinds of pieces to it, right? You can be in a specific house, with a pool or on the ravine or on the water or in a particular neighborhood that's really hot where you get a lot of attention, and then you can have another home. Maybe it's in a lesser excited area, or there's all kinds of different pieces to it. So there's no one big market. There's the big market, and then there's a million different pieces in it, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see how the different segments of the market behave as well. Different markets have more demand than others for them, bungalows or 2-stories or character homes or whatever. So it's going to be interesting to see, to watch. We will continue to do that, of course. Hopefully this was helpful. I apologize. I try to keep it as brief as I could, but it's impossible to do a quick thing that's also meaningful, right? So hopefully it was helpful. If you have any questions, we love hearing from you guys through the YouTube channel, Instagram, wherever it is. You're always welcome to reach out. Our contact info is going to be somewhere below or above here. Otherwise, we hope you're doing great. Hopefully you're enjoying this heat and enjoying seeing family and friends and all the amazing stuff that life has to give us, because we're getting there. You can feel it, and it's pretty exciting. Okay, thank you so much. Truly appreciate it. Hopefully you're well, and stay in touch. Okay, see ya. Bye-bye.